I've
Ugh,
received 3 offers for my T. Higgins so far.
gross.
I've been Darren Waller, which is the best of the 3 offers, and I'm not thinking twice about giving
Yeah,
up T.
no.
Higgins for Darren Waller. The other 2 offers I got were Dalvin Cook and Kadarius Toney. I mean, people are just trying to buy way too low here. Come on. Come on, guys. I'm not new to this game. I'm not selling low on a guy that put up 0 points week 1.
Week 2 is coming up, and we have got some trade targets for you to buy now. Everyone's been overreacting to week 1, Dave Kluge, and we just finished doing our panic meter episode where we also were overreacting to everything and deciding, do we want to keep these players? Do we want to let them go? How are we ranking them? Well, now we're going to give you some actionable advice of players to target before week 2 because they might be able to save your season. Now, before we jump into that, I actually want to look at a big piece of news that came out today. Eagles running back Kenneth Gainwell did not practice on Tuesday or today, Wednesday, when we're recording this. With DeAndre Swift being a guy that did not get a lot of run last week, are you checking your waiver wire for DeAndre Swift or even making some very, very low trade offers?
I think with the draft capital invested in DeAndre Swift, he's probably sticking on a lot of rosters. And if you are in one of those leagues where somebody overreacted and dropped DeAndre Swift, I'd put in a claim for him ASAP. He's a guy that I'd put maybe 12, 15% on and hope to pick up. But also, we've talked about it a lot, this Eagles offense. There isn't going to be a ton of production there. Jalen Hurts is the de facto goal line back. They're going to rotate touches. So I hate to say it, Alfredo, and please don't laugh at me, but they might elevate Rashad Penny. I mean, maybe he could be a part of the mix. We know Boston Scott's going to get some touches as well. So I think regardless, just because Kenneth Gainwell, if he doesn't play, I don't think they're going to say, okay, well, we got to give the ball to DeAndre Swift 25 times. I think this is just going to be a headache of a backfield, and honestly, I'm A-okay ignoring it. If I'm really hurting for a running back, like I said, maybe 12, 15% on DeAndre Swift, but I'm not feeling too good about it either way.
The best thing I saw yesterday on Twitter was a meme of it's that wrestling meme where it's like there's the one guy there, it's cheering in front, and then in the background you can see the Undertaker just ready to
Yes.
destroy him. And it's like the front guys, all of us excited to start DeAndre Swift in week 2, and then the Undertaker behind him, it was like Boston Scott stealing all the touches because that's totally something the Eagles would do, is give the touches to Boston Scott. And we talked about this yesterday. I don't think it matters which Eagles running back is actually starting. I don't know how valuable it's going to be.
And we also talked about our gross infatuation. I'm not saying you and I specifically. I'm saying the whole fantasy conglomerate community, whatever you want to call it, loves DeAndre Swift. But we have seen coaching staff after coaching staff not love DeAndre Swift. So
Yeah.
you want to talk about stepping on the banana peel. How many times are we going to put DeAndre Swift in our lineup and get hurt? I don't know. I guess I could see the case for it tomorrow if Kenneth Gainwell doesn't play. But like I said, I'm not feeling too good about it. I'm okay just kind of avoiding this backfield entirely.
Yeah, I was looking at the Eagles' schedule coming up, and it's just not friendly for running backs at all. Let me list the teams to you. So they've got Minnesota this week on a Thursday night, short week. Minnesota was actually pretty good in week 1 against the run. So let's see what happens there, right? But there's
Just were they good against the run, or is Rashad White just really bad at running the ball?
a bit of both.
All right.
But after that, Tampa Bay Buccaneers,
Yeah.
good run defense. Washington Commanders, good run defense. Los Angeles Rams, they have an Aaron Donald. New York Jets, good run defense. Miami, that's one of the big openings for them in terms of a running back that could produce. And they got Washington again. Then they've got Dallas, then a bye week, then Kansas City, where maybe they can get something going, but Chris Jones is now back. Then Buffalo, then San Francisco, then Dallas again. By the time they get a matchup where you're like, maybe I start someone and you don't even know who the running back is, it's Seattle in week 15, which, by the way, if you got a copy of the NFL script, that just feels like Rashad Penny will be the starting running back by that time and go off for 260 yards against the Seahawks. So
yeah, so looking
I
at
don't know
two
that
of
I
the
like
next
him.
14 weeks being maybe favorable. Yeah,
Right.
I think we had the right mindset to just kind of avoid this backfield altogether.
So if you're enjoying this video, by the way, right now, please drop a like on this. Leave a comment down below of maybe players that you're thinking of trading for. We're about to give you all of our trade targets right here. Let us know what you think. And if you have these trade questions, drop them below. We'll get back to you on each of them. Also, be sure that you are subscribed to the channel. You're going to be able to see our show 4 times a week. And then Sunday morning, live start sit Q&A with all of our subscribers. And it's not just us. You've got the Dynasty show, you've got the DFS show, and you've got the legendary show running for 18 years, The Audible, with Cecil Lammy and Sigmund Bloom. So you can check that out as well. Dave, We've got your first target to buy, and I think he might be one of the hottest names this week. And I think we have a little bit of dissenting opinions here. But Breece Hall, running back for the Jets. Tell me
Well,
why you're buying Breece.
and I'm not normally a guy that wants to like buy high on a player, but I'm kind of surprised. Like I looked at a bunch of different websites this morning, and he is still consistently ranked outside of the top 24. Even at Football Guys, we've got him as RB28. Fantasy Pros has him as RB26, and I think we should be looking at Breece Hall as a top 15 running back already. Knowing the ceiling that he possesses, he could be a top 3, top 5 guy down the stretch when these games matter the most. Now, I am going to get booed. Throw your tomatoes at me. I don't care. Adrian Peterson set the bar for ACL recoveries, and in his first game back from an ACL tear, he had 32 snaps, 18 touchdowns, 87 yards, went on for 2,000 yards and won an MVP that season. Breece Hall, on 17 snaps, had 12 touches and 147 yards on Monday night. 17 snaps, 12 touches. Almost every time he was on the field, they gave him the ball. Now, obviously, you can tell his conditioning wasn't 100%. He had that breakaway run that old Breece Hall would have easily housed, and you can tell at about 60 yards, he just got completely gassed. But there was a lot that I saw that I got excited about. On his first carry of the game, he was able to plant his foot and cut through the hole. He had a few plays where he was shaking defenders. He had a broken tackle before that big run. He bounced runs outside. His burst was still there. It's the long speed that we're a little bit concerned about. And again, we're looking at a super tiny sample size
Tiny
here.
sample small.
Tiny sample small. And it was, weighed by a handful of big plays, but leading the league in rushing yards over expectation per attempt. The reason I mention that is because Dalvin Cook's rushing yards over expectation per attempt were 5th worst on the week, behind only A.J. Dillon, Ramondre Stevenson, Cam Akers, and Rashad White. So now with Aaron Rodgers out, we know this team is going to lean on the run. And frankly, I just think that Breece Hall is eons ahead of current Dalvin Cook as far as talent level. They want to ease him in, but they can only hold him back so far. I think Breece Hall right now is probably a flex play, an RB2, but I think as the season goes on, he's just going to keep getting better, and he can be a top 3, top 5 guy at the end of the season.
So you think that people are going to be mad at you, and I'm going to come in and I'm going to step in front of these tomatoes for you, and I'm going to take more of the hate here because I think this is where we have a little bit of a dissenting opinion. I am still optimistic for Breece Hall to let's say return fantasy value. Okay. I was less optimistic about it before the season. Obviously, the 2 big plays give you plenty of hope. And then he had a nice reception on a screen. I will say this. We are still working with a small sample size. And I know it's very easy to get excited about big plays. Some of these big plays, one of them is kind of a wide open run where he got caught. There wasn't a whole lot of lateral movement. We did start to see more of it later in the game. When I looked at the splits for Breece, the 10 carries that he had, his first 2 carries for 109 yards. There's your rushing yards over expectation. And then the remaining 8 carries for 18 yards at just 2.25 yards per carry. I'm not really ready to put this one way or the other and say that this 10 carry performance was very indicative of what we're going to see for the season. But I think the one thing that still lingers in my head is obviously the ACL thing. So there's 2 things. And the second thing is just we now have a Nathaniel Hackett led offense with Zach Wilson at the helm. And I don't know that I trust anyone in that offense. I think both Dalvin and Breece are still out of shape, and I think they'll get there.
What I'll say is Nathaniel Hackett, you go back to his time in Green Bay, both Jamal Williams and Aaron Jones were able to put up good numbers there. And now, I don't want to, douse your take here too much.
But that was with Aaron Rodgers.
It was with Aaron Rodgers. Fair enough. But this team, they're going to run the ball a lot. And everybody, the fear is that he is going to see a lot of stacked fronts. Last year, he saw stacked fronts at one of the highest rates in the league, and he still put up elite numbers. I'm just not really too concerned about Dalvin Cook. We talked about this a ton in the offseason. I don't like to use the term washed, but I think Dalvin Cook is kind of washed. I think that Breece Hall is just such a better player, and they can only ignore his greatness for so long. And the last thing I'll say, Alfredo, You talk about taking away the two big plays. If you take away every player's best plays, they're all average players. I mean, this is what Breece Hall does. He did it last year. He rips off big plays. His breakaway running is one of the most impactful parts of his game. So, yeah, even if he is getting stuffed occasionally, I think that he still is going to possess that upside. His conditioning is going to get better. And that play that we saw him get chased down on, if that play happens in week 6, he's housing that. And he's giving you almost a 30-point week in fantasy. So, I am not too concerned right now if he's still being valued outside of the top 24 running backs. I am A-okay trading some guys that might be a little bit shocking right now. David Montgomery coming off a big week. I don't think that he's going to keep scoring, multiple touchdowns. I don't think he's going to be a Jamal Williams this year. So I'd trade away David Montgomery. Joe Mixon looks like he's in a little bit more of a committee than we expected. I would trade away Joe Mixon. I'm trying to get Breece Hall on my teams, and obviously I'm a little bit biased. I'm wearing the shirt here. I'm a big Breece Hall fan, but I'm trying to get him where I can, man.
I love it. I love it. Just rooting for Breece Hall, which, listen, I'm not against him. Like I said, I'm still optimistic that he's going to do well. I just didn't come equipped with a shirt like Dave with Breece Hall on it. All right, let me give you my first target to buy here before week 2. And this one should feel obvious, but I think that just like we did in our previous episode, sometimes you just have to state the obvious because it's not obvious to everybody. Jahmyr Gibbs is a guy that I think that we absolutely need to be trading for in leagues. And I think this is a good lesson in not overreacting to week 1 usage, whether, the stat lines end up being positive or negative. But for Jahmyr Gibbs, it was positive. He was showing that explosive ability that he had in college. He only had 7 carries, but 2 of those 7 carries were for 15 plus yards. So we're talking about a very similar game like what Breece Hall had. The thing is that outside of that, he was still running really well. He didn't have as much of a dip down. He was the week 1 leader in missed tackles forced per touch. He broke 6 tackles on 7 carries. Basically, anytime he had the ball, he was making guys miss. He was one of the most elusive running backs in week 1. And let's also talk about the fact that he was 1 slip where he slips on the 9-yard line.
Oh, that was brutal to watch, man. That was terrible.
He could have scored a touchdown. He could have scored a touchdown, and we're talking about him being probably a top 5 running back on the week from the type of production that he had in the receiving game and getting that touchdown. It made all the difference in the world because then eventually we get the touchdown from David Montgomery, who was, can I say he was cheeks? Is that allowed? Sorry, Joe.
I think so.
Yeah.
He did look good on that one touchdown run. That was like the one play that he really looked kind of good on. Shook a defender in the hole. Outside of that, he cheeks, yeah.
I don't know. It kind of looked like he just put his head down and just happened to run into a defender and still kind of spin off him. Like he ran very much like Isaiah Pacheco runs. Like they had the one angry run and it seemed like he didn't really know where he was going. The rest of the Lions offense, Marvin Jones, not reliable as a pass catcher. I don't think anyone's really relying on Josh Reynolds week in and week out. The 9 touches on 19 snaps for Gibbs was encouraging despite it being a small sample size. And I talked about this before. I've got friends telling me like, dude, Jahmyr Gibbs getting only 7 points. That's not going to cut it. Find that guy in your league that doesn't believe. Find him and go and trade for Jahmyr Gibbs. We've seen this before, the same song and dance. The guy he was compared to all throughout his draft process, Alvin Kamara, averaged nearly the same kind of usage through his first 4 games. And then he finished as the running back 3 in fantasy as a rookie because he was getting the receiving usage that Jahmyr Gibbs is getting. Dan Campbell did mention this was all by design. He's easing him in. The workload is going to go up in week number 2. I can't imagine that David Montgomery is going to continue to get 21 stinking carries a game. And Dave, everyone, they can prepare their tomatoes right now and throw them at me because willing.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I want to hear what you have to say before I get wrecked. So go for it.
No, I was going to completely agree with you. So let me hear who are some guys that you would trade away for Jahmyr Gibbs. Let's give the actionable advice to the audience.
So first, if there's someone who is saying Breece Hall looks like he's back, Breece Hall is him, cool. I am trading Breece Hall for Jahmyr Gibbs. I am happy
forgot
with
my tomatoes.
Jahmyr Gibbs. Yeah, go get your tomatoes, boy. And then this one I think is really going to ruffle some feathers. I'm happy trading Brandon Ayuk for Jahmyr Gibbs. We still saw. I know that he was excellent in week 1. Don't get me wrong. But are we expecting Brandon Ayuk to be scoring multiple touchdowns a week? Like it's not that he can't still be good throughout the year. It's that I think we got his peak here in week 1. And we're also hoping Brandon Ayuk is going to stay healthy throughout the year, which he never really done. We're also hoping that Deebo Samuel remains relegated to the secondary role, that George Kittle remains relegated to the secondary role, that Christian McCaffrey still remains contained within that offense. There's still so many weapons on that offense that I'm willing to trade Brandon Ayuk for Gibbs because of the scarcity at that running back position and the ceiling for Gibbs that could finish. I'm not saying he will, but could finish as an easy top 10 running back because of the passing game usage. Whereas I don't know that I see that particularly for Brandon Ayuk, and I'm fine selling high on that.
Yeah, I mean, I've got Gibbs and Breece pretty similar in my rest of season rankings. Breece obviously moved up after what we saw on Monday, him looking way better than I had anticipated. But Jahmyr Gibbs was my RB11 in pre-draft rankings, and he's my RB11 today because he didn't do anything that, I mean, he looked great. I'm not going to move him down because of a lack of usage in week one as a rookie. I mean, we knew this was going to happen. And I just want to take everything that you just said about Jahmyr Gibbs, and let's also apply that to Bijan Robinson. If anybody is worried about Bijan Robinson, for whatever reason, he did nothing to move in my rankings as well. I mean, these were what you expect to see from a rookie running back getting up to speed in their first NFL debut. If anybody, I mean, it's news to me that people would be panicking about Jahmyr Gibbs or Bijan Robinson, but I mean, if you're getting people asking you what's going on with these 7 points, I guess there might be a buy low window here. So yeah, I mean, you and I were recording right now, and I think as soon as we're done recording, I'm going to start sending some offers out for Breece Hall and see if I can get that league taco to do something.
That league taco. Like seriously though, I do look at this, and you say that they haven't moved in the rankings. I think it's fair to say they haven't moved down, but they might have actually moved up. They might have supplanted some of those guys that were kind of like the default RB, like 10s.
Well, I was very high on both of these guys to begin with.
I know you were. I know you were. So maybe they're not moving up, but like there's guys like maybe Joe Mixon should not be ranked ahead of Jahmyr Gibbs like some people had, and Najee Harris is quite a bit lower, and like there's some of those guys.
Henry is suddenly a timeshare back now.
That's weird too. So I think there's a lot of upside with these young rookie running backs. Still think that these guys, you should be buying for them if anyone's freaking out in your league. Now, before we keep going, and Dave gives us his second buy target here before week 2, I want to let you guys know we have these awesome weekly rankings over at footballguys.com, and they are 100% free. There's nothing behind a paywall when it comes to looking at these rankings week to week. However, if you want to get rankings that are going to be catered to your league settings, your roster, the scoring, all that, all you have to do is become a pro subscriber to Football Guys. It's the most affordable subscription in all of fantasy football. It's going to feature the rankings from myself and Dave and various other analysts here at Football Guys, including Jeff Bell and all of our projectors. So head on over to footballguys.com and check out the rankings that we have there. You'll see the link in the description down below. Dave, let's get to your second target, and it's a guy that I touted all offseason. And dude, he was like an inch away from being one of the best wide receivers of the week.
Yeah, and I mean, you give him an extra inch, and he goes from a pretty disappointing fantasy day to 20.3 points on Sunday. Keenan Allen, I mean, he was the lone bright, well, Austin Eckler looked good, but Keenan Allen was like the lone bright spot in the passing offense. Mike Williams, I don't know why I said Michael.
Who is Michael?
I am mad at him. I almost dropped a middle name on him. Like, Michael Williams, how dare you look like this in your debut? Mike Williams, he threw up some points in the box score, but he didn't look too good. Quentin Johnson
threw up is about right.
Yeah, Mike Williams threw up. Quentin Johnson was pretty non-existent. I mean, Donald Parham was maybe like a bright spot in the offense, but basically what I'm getting at, it's going to be the Keenan Allen show in Los Angeles yet again. He could have had a 20-plus point game if he punched that touchdown in. Instead, he finished as the wide receiver 1. So maybe somebody out there looks at the score and says, this isn't the guy that I drafted to be my wide receiver 1. I don't want him on my team anymore, but he drew 9 targets. He's just a guy that I'm A-okay trying to go out and get right now. Last year, when Keenan Allen returned from injury, he averaged 18.8 points per game. Only Justin Jefferson and Devontae Adams outscored him last year. People have this, we joke about it all the time. Like, he had that one game where he burned a lot of fantasy managers where he said, don't sit me, and then he put up no points. And because of that, like, people think that he's injury prone now. But this dude was an Iron Man before the hamstring injury last year. So he's a guy that I am A-okay buying low on. Concerns about his age and box score scouts might be worried about the week 1 outing. I'm not going to give any guys that I am trying to actionably trade for him right now, because the next guy I want to talk about is directly behind him in my rest of season rankings. So I'll kind of lump these two guys together, but I got some spicy names that I'd go out and trade for Keenan Allen right now.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, okay. I guess we won't hear them. We have to tease for later. But
Yeah.
you know what? What I like what
Hold
we're
on to your
doing right
britches
now.
for another 12 minutes.
Who says britches? What are you doing this episode? All right. Britches secured. What I do like that we're doing here is we're not, I don't think that we're talking about the incredibly obvious guys like the Saquons and Josh Jacobs, who are ranked as top 5 running backs and finished outside the top 30 this last week, because I think no fantasy manager is going to be trading those guys away, right? They're going to wait. So what we're doing is you're kind of going for those mid-range guys that like we know are good. The usage is there. The potential is there, but they may be just disappointed a little bit in week 1. And I think I kind of keep this theme going here with Sir Kenjamin Walker the Third. I'm just going to keep adding to his name. By the way, if you're not sure who that is, that's Ken Walker, running back for the Seattle Seahawks. I think he's a less obvious buy. He didn't have a horrible week 1, but I think there are people that are going to see what happened and say like, all right, Seahawks are dust, or Kenneth Walker is not the same guy he was last year. He was running back 26 on the week. And that's not inspiring if you're just looking at the box score. But I think that what we saw here is we saw his floor for fantasy production. I think a lot of people, including us, would have said this was the worst case scenario for Ken Walker, a very pass heavy game where they're losing. And you're saying, well, okay, that means he's going to be out of the game a lot. You're going to have DJ Dallas in there and Zach Charbonnet and the guys who are, supposed to be much better at not only pass blocking, but receiving. And this is weird because Seattle just abandoned the run in the second half. Ken Walker had 10 rush attempts in the first half, only 2 attempts in the second half. Seattle as a team only had 3 rush attempts in the second half. It was and one of them was like a throwaway final rush attempt to Zach Charbonnet with 5 seconds left as they're down by like, I don't remember
Saved
how many
his
points.
day.
Yeah, saved his day.
Went from 0.2 to 1.1 points. Let's go, baby. We're live.
Yeah, and so it was a weird game for Seattle. I think that's what you're looking for. Is you're looking for these games that had weird game scripts that you don't expect to continue. What we saw here, at least from all the what we like to call the peripheral metrics, or the peripheral numbers for Ken Walker.
You're fancy, huh?
Yeah, I broke out my thesaurus today. He's the obvious leader in this backfield. 63% of the snaps. And this one I'm stealing this stat right here. I'm stealing this from JJ Zachariason, friend of the show. If you've never heard of him or listened to his stuff, go check out Late Round Podcast. But Ken Walker had a 71% rush share and a 21% target share. Best of his career. He was the only running back in the NFL in week 1 to be over a 70% rush share and over a 20% target share. So the usage is certainly there. And I think that if we see Seattle stay in games and they're actually scoring points, I think that Ken Walker, all this usage can turn into more fantasy production. And what we saw was actually like design targets for Ken Walker out of the backfield, which we don't normally see. They were lining up in like some crazy wishbone formation, Dave. I don't know if you saw that. And then they're running like play action passes out of the backfield to Ken Walker. There was a lot of stuff here that was by design to get the ball in his hands in the open field. And you know what? He looked good. He didn't look great, but he looked good. And then the flip side of this, Dave, is that if Geno is bad, like you were talking about, you said like you believe, hey, I think Geno might have finally been exposed. It happened a little bit last year.
Fair enough. That was in yesterday's pregame, so this is news to the audience. But we did talk about that during the pre-show, pregame,
behind the scenes,
warming up. Yeah, behind the scenes, we talked about it a little bit. I mean, Geno did have a slow finish to the season. Now, I don't want to throw around like Geno was exposed and Geno sucks. That's not what I'm saying. But maybe we did have our sights a little bit too high on the Seattle offense. Maybe they aren't going to be this powerhouse offense like they were to start the 2022 season. So that is my only trepidation at all with buying into this offense right now, is that perhaps they aren't as good as we thought they'd be.
Well, and my counter to that is that if the offense is not as good as we thought they were, reverse Denny Green here, if Geno Smith has been figured out, what is Seattle going to do? What's Pete Carroll going to do? They're going to lean on the running game. They're going to kind of have to. And I think this could make Kenneth Walker a major workhorse for the Seattle Seahawks. And this one is when I bring up this potential trade away, right? I'm going to say Breece Hall again. Okay. Because I think that right now, and I know you fully disagree with it, and that's fine. I'm sure that a lot of the audience is going to disagree with it as well, because Breece did look super explosive and the Seahawks were so bad. So there weren't a lot of eyes on Ken Walker. But I'll say this. You've got Ken Walker who's not recovering from an ACL. You've got Ken Walker who controls that backfield. And you've got an offense that I think should be better than the New York Jets. And even if they're not, they're going to lean heavily on Ken Walker. If Zach Charbonnet does show up later in the season, I think we're looking at something that's very similar that's already happening to Breece Hall with Dalvin Cook and Michael Carter being involved in that offense. So I'm comfortable. And this is a very fair trade, I think. I don't think you're gaining much of an advantage on anyone, but I think it's just a preference. It's picking your flavor. I'd be comfortable trading Breece Hall for Ken Walker. Dave, go ahead.
I think that's our audience hook right there. If you're watching the show on YouTube, leave it in the comments. If you're listening on audio, leave a podcast review. Let us know if you'd prefer Kenneth Walker or Breece Hall, because I think that is a pretty good question. And I think you're a little bit higher on most than Ken Walker. I'm obviously a little bit higher on most than Breece Hall. So let's get a reality check here. I want to see what the people think, because I think that is a pretty good one. I would obviously prefer Breece Hall. I still think, obviously I aggressively touted Zach Charbonnet in the offseason. And I am a little bit concerned. He had a pretty quiet preseason, and then we saw him get very little work. So, we're kind of talking about Jahmyr Gibbs and Bijan Robinson not panicking over their workload, but they look very good in their limited snaps. Zach Charbonnet didn't really do much in his limited snaps, so there is a possibility here that maybe we ignored a very quiet drumbeat. We always talk about the drumbeat. We hear about Puka Nacua all preseason and ignore it, but maybe when we don't hear a drumbeat, there was nothing coming out of Seattle's camp about Zach Charbonnet. Maybe we should have paid closer attention to that. So there is a possibility that Kenneth Walker is just the guy in Seattle, and he is one of those few lone workhorses, but maybe we see Zach Charbonnet's role grow throughout the season. So I don't know. I'm really wish-washy on this one. I don't have a strong take either way. I prefer Breece Hall, but I completely am buying what you're selling on Kenneth Walker.
Yeah, and something you said there was really important. I think it's a lesson for going forward throughout the season and going into next season is sometimes that silence is deafening. Like that's the most damning thing is when you're not hearing about a player at all. That's I think when you should actually be worried, when the beat reporters are not writing a thing about him. All right, let's move ahead here. But before we do, I want to let you guys know about Sleeper, the fastest organically growing fantasy platform in the world. Over 5 million active users. Dave, I was running through all my waivers last night, and it was so easy because all of my leagues are on Sleeper. It was really simple, able to put in all of my fab claims for players, and it's so great because you can have them just all run at different times, and it's just been a phenomenal app and phenomenal to have all my leagues in one easy-to-use app that gives us so much functionality for the commissioner as well. But now, Sleeper has what's called Sleeper Picks. It's a real money product that lets you choose 2 to 8 of your favorite players from before the games or even during the games and across different sports even. You can pick more or less than the allotted or predicted stats that are there, and you win money. Sleeper is the only app that's giving you up to 100 times payouts. So you get to play against your friends, you get to win money together, whatever you'd like to do. Head on over to sleeper.com/promo/FBG. Link is in the description down below. Dave, let's get to our final 2 trade targets to go after before week 2 starts. And I really like this one. I feel like this is an obvious guy.
Yeah.
But we talked about him yesterday on the Panic Meter show or the Threat Level Midnight episode. And I think I'm buying what you're selling here.
Yeah, and I talked about a couple trade offers that I'd gotten for T. Higgins. I actually misspoke when I said one was Breece Hall. It was actually Dalvin Cook was the trade offer that I got. So people are trying to buy too low on T. Higgins. I've received 3 offers for my T. Higgins so far.
Gross.
I've been Darren Waller, which is the best of the 3 offers, and I'm not thinking twice about giving up T. Higgins for Darren Waller. The other 2 offers I got were Dalvin Cook and Kadarius Toney. People are just trying to buy way too low here. Come on, guys. I'm not new to this game. I'm not selling low on a guy that put up 0 points week 1. He had 8 targets. What did I say yesterday? Funny. I repeat, he had 8 targets, second most targets on the team behind Ja'Marr Chase. And if we go back 2 years ago, he had a 23.9% target share, which is absolutely elite. And I think that some people can look at last year's target share, which dipped down to 18.6%, and say, maybe T. Higgins just isn't that guy. But that is missing so much context. You need to take last year's stats with a grain of salt. He played less than 65% of the snaps in 4 of 16 games. Of course, he had that one game where he came out for 1 snap and then hit the sidelines. He was limited with injury in 25% of his games last year. If we look at the games when he was healthy, he averaged 8.3 targets per game, 5.5 receptions per game, 77 yards, scored a touchdown in 2 out of 3 outings, and averaged 17 points per game. That would have been wide receiver 8 last year. So kind of throw those injured games out the window. Look at when he was fully up to speed, and he was giving us better than top 10 numbers. So we talked about it on yesterday's show. I think we had it at the very bottom tier of panic level. Like, we are not panicking about this Bengals offense. We know it's a great offense. We know it's a high flying pass attack. We know Joe Burrow's good, and we know T. Higgins is good. But some people are going to see that 0 point outing and maybe overreact. If this opens up any opportunity to buy low, I'm doing it. We already talked about Brandon Ayuk. I think his name is coming up more than once on this show. Brandon Ayuk is a great football player, and he had a spectacular week one, but there are too many mouths to feed in San Francisco for him to continue producing like that on a week in and week out basis. So if I can flip Brandon Ayuk for T. Higgins, I'm doing that in a heartbeat. Talked a little bit about the Seattle offense. DK Metcalf is a great player, and he had a pretty solid week one outing, but if I can flip DK Metcalf for T. Higgins, in a heartbeat. And the last guy I'll throw in here is Garrett Wilson. I don't know if you can flip Garrett Wilson for T. Higgins, because I think a lot of people realize that he is going to drop quite a bit without Aaron Rodgers there, but it doesn't hurt to float the offer out there and see if you can flip your Garrett Wilson coming off a touchdown catch for T. Higgins coming off 0. And again, I said I lumped this guy in with Keenan Allen, so all those same guys, Brandon Ayuk, DK Metcalf, Garrett Wilson, if you can flip them for Keenan Allen, I'd do the same. I think there's a lot of ways that you can try to acquire these guys. Keenan Allen and T. Higgins coming off kind of quiet weeks, and we know that when healthy, they can give you top 10 numbers every single week. So two guys that I am hoping that I can trade for this week and then get as potential wide receiver ones for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I think before the season, these were guys that were fringe wide receiver ones, and I think that potential is still there. But because of the week one, let's call it letdown, that maybe some fantasy managers are looking at, they might be willing to sell. I think there are people that are freaking out about T. Higgins, so I like that call, Dave. I've got another guy here that I think is a little less obvious, but I think there's a lot of narratives that kind of go with this as to why people might be freaking out. And I'm willing to go out and buy DeAndre Hopkins, wide receiver for the Tennessee Titans. And I think that this is a good combination of finding a player that has great talent, who has done it before, and still seeing a ton of volume. And I think that there's going to be a narrative that, DeAndre Hopkins is washed, that Ryan Tannehill is washed, which he might be. That's fine.
Yeah.
But, there's going to be someone who drafted him and probably thought that DeAndre Hopkins was still a top 12 wide receiver. He still looks great running his routes. He had his wins and his losses against Marshawn Lattimore last week in week one. Okay. Some of them look great. Marshawn Lattimore was on the ground, and other times Marshawn Lattimore had him blanketed, or DeAndre Hopkins oftentimes was being double covered too. I don't think we're going to see that every single week, but Hopkins still had 7 receptions on 13 targets, a ridiculous 39% target share of that offense. Now, that's probably not going to hold, but that's a good place to start. And what this tells me is that there is going to be a lot of offense that's just revolved around DeAndre Hopkins. There's going to be a target insulation for him every single week, even if the Titans are bad. Next week, here in week 2, the Titans, are playing against the Chargers, who just gave up a ton of points to Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. Tua Tagovailoa threw all over them. Ryan Tannehill may not be very good, but that was certainly, and I think it probably is. I did not go through every single game of his career, but I think it was the worst game of his career. 47% completion rate, only 198 passing yards, 0 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. And like you said, he was like crow hopping to make throws. He was short arming things. He was tossing the ball into double coverage.
Missed a wide open Chigakonkwo.
Yeah, I saw that. It was awful. And it was one of those like catch and run. Like it would have been a really nice, like 50-yard plus type play for Okonkwo. I think there should be a little bit of a course correction for Ryan Tannehill here, even if it's just to below average, right? Like I doubt he's coming out and playing this bad again, hitting less than 50% of his throws, throwing 3 interceptions. I think we're going to see at least him be a little bit better. And we saw that with DeAndre Hopkins, even if he has an average quarterback last year with Colt McCoy, he was a top 15 wide receiver in 2 out of those 3 games together. And that was a bad offense. So I do think there is plenty of reason to be excited about DeAndre Hopkins still. And this is a bit more of taking that narrative of a league mate that may say D-Hop's old, Titans are going to be bad, Ryan Tannehill's dust. Some of those things can be true, while DeAndre Hopkins being valuable for fantasy can also still be true. And at this point, I think I'm comfortable trading away Michael Pittman, who I think way overperformed better than any of us thought in week 1. 11 targets for Pittman. He caught a 39-yard touchdown, Dave. I know you said we're not allowed to take away the good plays that a player had, because if you do, then they just have bad plays left. Okay, I'm doing it again anyways. That's fine. I don't know that we're going to see these, great games from Michael Pittman week in and week out with a rookie quarterback like Anthony Richardson. Also, Alec Pierce in that offense really didn't get a whole lot of targets. I think Josh Downs is going to continue to get.
Killing it out of the
That was
slot.
my guy. That was my guy. So, and we don't know what's going to happen to this offense if and when Jonathan Taylor returns too. So I think there's still a lot of question marks around that Colts offense, just as many as there were before the season started. And I think that if you're able to, I think, upgrade from Michael Pittman to DeAndre Hopkins, and some might see that as a lateral move. What I see it as is a guy that I think has a better floor and potentially a better ceiling, especially because I do think the Tennessee Titans are going to remain more competitive in their division than the Colts probably will throughout the rest of the season. Dave, are you okay with DeAndre Hopkins, or do you think he's washed?
I don't think he's washed. No, I mean, he's still look great. He is one of those receivers I think that can age pretty gracefully. You know, he's not somebody who wins on raw speed and athleticism. Like, he still can muscle people out at the catch point, but it's really his ability to separate. And he was still doing that. I mean, who was it? I'm completely drawing a blank, but I saw he put one guy in a complete blender. Like, the guy tripped up.
Yeah, it was Marshawn Lattimore.
Yeah, and Marshawn Lattimore completely fell down on the play, and DeAndre Hopkins was on an island. So I don't think that he's lost it. And this is one of my favorite stats that I pulled up from this offseason. And, you know, DeAndre Hopkins obviously he got to play a big chunk of his career with prime Deshaun Watson and prime Kyler Murray, but he had 59 games throughout his career that he played with other quarterbacks. Let me list these guys because it's an ugly list. Ryan Fitzpatrick, Ryan Mallett, Case Keenum, Brian Hoyer, TJ Yates, Brandon Whedon, Brock Osweiler, Tom Savage, AJ McCarron, Colt McCoy, and Trace McSorley. He still averaged 16.6 points per game in those games with those quarterbacks. Like, he's giving you wide receiver one production regardless of who the quarterback was. Obviously, he was younger in those days, but Nuke is still a great wide receiver. He might not be a top 10 guy at this point in his career, but he was drawing targets. He was getting open. I think he's going to be just fine. Another guy that I'd throw out there that we talked about that didn't look too great this weekend is Mike Williams. So you said Mike Pittman. I'd throw out a Mike Williams offer and see if he can get DeAndre Hopkins as well. I think that he should be a very serviceable high-end wide receiver too this year.
Well, there you have it. We got our 6 trade targets that we are looking to buy before week 2. And Dave and I are going to be back tomorrow with special guest Matt Waldman to give you our week 2 starts of the week. I think we did pretty good in week 1, right? You had Tua Tagovailoa, obvious start of the week there. I think we did pretty good in week 1. We'll be back here tomorrow to give you our starts of the week for week 2. I want to thank our production team, Julia, Dylan, Jagger. You guys do some awesome work every single week, every episode. Thank you so much. And I want to thank all of you for watching all the way through, listening all the way through, and joining us for every single episode. We'll see you next time. Adios.